Okay, so thank you for joining us this afternoon. Our guest presenter today is Kellie Tharp. She is the Education Branch Chief with the Arizona Game and Fish Department, and she's talking to us about the Desert Tortoise Adoption Program, including their desert tortoise habitat needs, the native plants that they like to eat, and then what you need to do to become ready to become someone who's able to adopt a desert tortoise. So thank you very much, Kellie, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Lisa. And hi, everybody. There's a few names that look familiar. Before I get going, I'll introduce myself quickly. I've been with the department for 15 years. I've been chief of education for probably about 13 of those 15 years. I like to say I have one of the coolest jobs ever. Some others at the department might disagree because we all enjoy what we do. I oversee many of our education endeavors, our wildlife center, where we have captive non-releasable wildlife, our outreach education programs, our professional development for educators, off-highway vehicle, boats, tortoises, you name it, we got it. So today, what I want to do is provide a kind of big picture look at what it takes to adopt a desert tortoise, some of the requirements, and I'm very open to kind of Q&A. Lisa can pop in as needed. I'll probably not be able to keep up with the chat, so you might have to help me with that, but we'll definitely have time after as well. Okay. So in Arizona, it is legal to adopt a desert tortoise. The possession limit is 1 per person per household. And historically, back in 1989, that was when some rules went into place preventing individuals from being able to collect them from the wild. And down the road, the concept of the adoption program came into play. We've been running the adoption program since I've worked for the agency, so 15 years. Prior to that, it was with a different organization for a short period of time. It's a big undertaking, and the resources needed to run it efficiently is really challenging. Over the past, I'd say 5+ years, we've seen a dramatic uptick in what we refer to as kind of illegal breeding situations. Sometimes they're unintentional. Sometimes they're well-meaning individuals that have housed males and females together. Tortoises can hold on and retain sperm for a long period of time and have fertilized eggs into perpetuity for many years after that encounter. So it catches up really quickly. It is illegal since 2016 to knowingly allow your tortoises to breed, because we have such a huge problem. Every year we receive over 300 surrendered, confiscated tortoises at our facility. And talking about it doesn't seem as overwhelming as it is when you look at all of those tortoises. It's a lot to take care of. So a little bit of a program overview. That picture is from our lovely veterinarians. They come out during tortoise season once a week, and we work to process as many tortoises as we can. At our wildlife center, that's where our desert tortoise adoption program is housed, and we have 1 desert tortoise adoption program coordinator. Now, 1 person can't do everything themselves, so all of us chip in along the way. I help with outreach. There's a lot of different people that do try to help out. We have a great partner in Tucson with Arizona Sonora Desert Museum, and they have the ability, they can take in about 10 desert tortoises at a time, and they assist with adopting out in the Tucson area. And they've been a great partner for many years. We work closely with them. We all use the same application. We try to standardize our approach, our intake, things like that. So what happens when somebody shows up or contacts us and wants to surrender tortoises, or our officers confiscate tortoises? They make it to the center, and they're they go into quarantine. Tortoises carry a lot of ickies, just like mammals and other animals. They tend to have fecal parasites when they show up. So we keep them in quarantine. They'll get an intake health check, weight, gender if they're old enough. Sometimes they need to get to be about 10 or older to be able to tell male, female. We run fecal tests in-house to try to make sure we don't have hookworm and other things that are moving into our larger system of tortoises. They're going to get assigned a number, and a small colored tag is going to get affixed to their shell. And that helps us keep track of everybody. When you have, 300 plus tortoises moving around, you always have to keep track of who's who and where everybody is at. We also connect adopters with that number. So if their tortoise gets out and somebody contacts us, we can try to match them back together. Through tortoise season, every Wednesday, our lovely vets come out and they do a more in-depth physical exam. They're going to do a body condition score. They're checking eyes, mouth, nose. They palpate for bladder stones, which is an ailment that desert tortoises commonly get. Depending on that vet visit, we then possibly will collect blood, or might have to do x-rays depending on if we want to know if they're gravid, are they carrying eggs, have they been with a male, or if we're looking for bladder stone. Sometimes they need to receive medications. They might have an upper respiratory infection, which is very common in captive desert tortoises. And the primary reason that many people say, well, why don't you just let them go in the wild? Shouldn't this help the population? And it could actually be devastating to our native population if people were to release captive desert tortoises into the wild. There isn't a lot of research, but the research that does exist has shown that upper respiratory infection, the upper respiratory disease, doesn't seem to be as prevalent in the wild as it is in captivity. Probably has to do with the man-made burrows and a variety of different things, that the habitat isn't exactly the same as in the wild when they're either finding someone else's burrow or, creating their own burrow. So that is one reason why they don't go out on their own, and we don't release them. That is illegal to release them. So focus of today, try to simplify and make it easy because it can get overwhelming. 5 steps to adopting a desert tortoise. I'm going to try to walk you through each step. There are links where you can find those 5 steps and PDFs. We have all the information for you. So we will for sure get you that info. So step 1, that involves research, and folks kind of touched on it earlier. It's really looking into, is a desert tortoise right for your family? I hear so many great stories from families that adopted that weren't sure. They'd never had a reptile. They were a little nervous. Desert tortoises actually have a variety of different personalities. Some can be, kind of very recluse, off on their own. Some are out and engaging, coming to the sliding door. There's, a variety of kind of different behaviors and personalities you'll see. They're an addition to your family, just like traditional pets. They do require a vet visit at least once, sometimes twice a year, if possible. We do partnerships with a couple exotic veterinary clinics in the Valley that do like a pre-brumation clinic. So there was a great question earlier about brumation versus hibernation. Brumation tends to be related to reptiles, and hibernation tends to be linked to mammals. Hibernation is connected more to lowering your respiratory rate and staying in kind of that inactive period of time for a longer period of time. Whereas in brumation, you might see your tortoise on warmer days, they'll get up, come out, and it doesn't have to do for them as much with lowering their respiratory rate. But they're very similar in nature, just a little technical difference there. So if you invite a desert tortoise to be part of your family, there is a period of time that they're brumating throughout the year. So depending on temperatures, usually late September, early October is when they're going to brumate. And then they start coming out. This year's been a little slow, but typically March through April, and it all has to do with your overnight temps. And as they get warmer, you're going to see them more active and waking up, coming out, wanting a nice soak. There's a lot of resources on our website. We have a desert tortoise adoption guide that goes through many of the different aspects of caring for a desert tortoise. It has the enclosure requirements, how to build a burrow. We've got PDFs, video, variety of resources there. And then one of our most popular brochures, which was in partnership and created with Native Plant Society in Arizona. It's a brochure on native plants for desert tortoises. And that is a highly sought after brochure, and it's referenced all the time. Everybody that adopts gets one. So those are some resources we have on the website and a good place to look. Do we have questions? I'll do a little pause to see if so far, are there any questions?
There are some. I think we'll wait because I think
Okay.
we're going to answer some of them, or we'll get to them. So right now, I think where we're at, we're good.
Cool. Let's head into step 2. So, big thing is finding a habitat, and you have a few options. If your yard isn't enclosed or you have open fencing, when a tortoise can see through the fencing, the tortoise typically wants to dig to get to the other side that it can see through. So typically when we talk about an enclosure, the materials being solid is really important. Some people don't have pools or other hazards in their yard, and they've been able to create their desert tortoise habitat that is their whole yard. So the tortoise has kind of run of the yard. Some folks have a variety of things that it doesn't make sense for the tortoise, and it might not be safe for the tortoise to be in the whole yard. So they create an enclosure, which is similar to what you see in the picture. Solid barrier up to about 24 inches high. And we'll kind of go through in that habitat the important components. So one component's the enclosure. Another component is the burrow. That's under that slanted shade. The burrow is under there. Shade is a big one. And a water dish. We typically use a plant saucer. We do have resources on the website that can go through enclosure guidelines, burrow building video, burrow building PDF. For adult tortoises, typically 18 by 18 square feet. That's ample size for an adult tortoise. A juvenile could be 8 by 8, and then a hatchling could be smaller, 4 by 4. you're just going to need to have a predator-proof top. So just a few extra steps would go in, and also some diet adjustments. They need some supplements as hatchlings, as they're growing their scutes in their shell. So here are some enclosure examples. Solid perimeter fence barrier. It can be wood, it could be brick, it could be stone. The big, most important things to think about is ensuring that there aren't any footholds. So that would be somewhere a tortoise could kind of get their leg up, and as they're trying to maybe go up and over, they could inadvertently flip themselves over. That's really dangerous in the summertime. So you want that perimeter fence to not have any footholds, and having it 18 to 24 inches high and be solid, all very important. Some more examples. Again, wood. In Arizona, it is challenging. You perhaps will have to replace it more often, but there's a variety of different approaches people have taken to kind of make that enclosure, including the picture on the far right that's on the side of a house in between the block wall and the house. Some folks have, kind of the one on the far left, they've built, a pretty extravagant fence. They also have that predator-proof top on top of their interior tortoise enclosure. So it's like two enclosures in one on the far left. Building a burrow. This is probably one of, and it isn't super hard. It's just something to be researched and think about before you start building a burrow. There's a variety of options. You could use 2 5-gallon buckets, cut off the bottom of one of them, put them together. You could use a 30-gallon plastic trash can, cut it in half. You could use cinder blocks. Some people have used very large pieces of PVC. Anything to either create the cylinder that is going to go at a 20-degree angle. You definitely want it facing north. Some of the most important parts is the insulation. So typically 8 inches of insulation on the top. And you want a small 3 to 4 inch berm across the entrance, and that's preventing, during our monsoon season, flooding. Last thing you do not want water and moisture down in the burrow. Tortoise could drown, and it also can add to upper respiratory infection, and having it be moist. If that animal already has had an infection before, you definitely want to keep it dry in there. The insulation on top, that is to keep the burrow typically between about like 68 to 80, 85, 86 degrees. That's the optimal kind of summer temp inside the burrow. You never want to go over 90 degrees inside your burrow. The tortoise can easily overheat. That's why we talk about shade, adding a shade structure, a tree during the heat of the day, making sure that burrow has, some shade on it to keep it insulated. So here are some examples. This is what a cinder block burrow looks like. So common cinder blocks, kind of follow it left, right, filling it with the dirt, piece of wonder board, couple pieces of wonder board usually to hold that, the weight of the dirt on top of it. Add your dirt on top. You can kind of, make it look nice, add some rocks. You can make it aesthetically pleasing, and you've got your burrow through the cinder block method. Here's some other burrow examples from recent adopters. A variety of approaches, but again, they all have that 6 to 8 inch, dirt on top. You definitely want to move gravel and rocks away from the entry. Gravel and the rocks, they heat up and get a lot hotter during the summer. And so you really do want to have that natural substrate for the tortoise to be able to walk on. We always recommend plant saucers for a water dish, 12 to 14 inches. They might drink some, but they're probably going to soak in it a couple times a week. And also that berm to just make sure the burrow does not flood. So, tortoise safe yard. There are some dangers for tortoises. Gates, not having a secured gate, having a gate open, tortoise is going to wander out. Typically, we get 3 to 4 calls a day on our tortoise adoption hotline about a lost tortoise or a found tortoise. So securing your gate. Also, if you can, have something solid if they can see through the gate, so they don't spend extra time kind of pacing or looking to try to get out. A separate area for dogs or supervised interactions. On the far right, that's a sulcata, but it's still just kind of for more informational. Our vet clinic did a dog bite awareness month in March, and that was one of the pictures they shared. They get 3 to 4 tortoises in each day through springtime that are dog bite injuries. A lot of tortoises and dogs can coexist. We just always advocate for supervised interactions. It seems to go best. And if you have a dog that uses the yard, having just a separate area for the tortoise to be seems to be the safest. Areas with dirt or grass for them to walk on, that natural substrate, like I mentioned. The rocks and concrete get really hot in the summer. Tortoise safe plants, that's another thing to take a look at in the yard and make sure. I have some references coming of toxic plants. So this would be probably the slide most pertinent to a lot of things everyone is interested in. So top 10 desert tortoise perennials. Those are some of the favorites. I had to give a shout out to the globe mallow. That is a crowd pleaser. Desert tortoises love globe mallow. They also love the Arizona grape ivy, penstemon, prickly pear. Usually that's more of a treat, but they love a lot of plants and flowers. Desert tortoises' primary diet can consist of timothy or Bermuda hay, grass and weeds. They love dandelion, Bermuda grass in your yard. They love to graze on that, and then native plants as well. Things to avoid. Desert tortoises are different than a lot of other exotic tortoises. So fruit can ultimately cause them a lot of issues in the long run. So like once a month, maybe a piece of strawberry, but really limit that fruit. That is not their primary diet. No meat, no dog food, nothing like that. Plants to avoid: oleander, eucalyptus, lantana. There's a link to the tortoise group, and they have a list of plants that are toxic to tortoises and kind of the levels of what happens with each one if they ingest it. So it's a good resource to look at and check out. So step 3, we added an online application process to help us stay organized, reduce paper, and kind of expedite the process. So when you go, there's a picture here. That's what the online application looks like. We've got some questions. We keep that in the database, again, hopefully to reunite you with your tortoise, say it got out. We ask for pictures and a description of your enclosure or yard, touching on some of the really important things: the size, picture of your burrow, showing the shade options, especially shade during the heat of the day. You can write in the description, The block wall or the house shades the burrow between, 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock, whatever it might be. Show kind of the food and water plan, enclosure fencing, photos of the yard, pool fence, gates, fire pits. Tortoises don't swim, and they do not do well in a fire pit either. So those need to be fenced off, secured, so your tortoise does not end up in either. We accept applications year round. We adopt out tortoises typically from April through September. This year, we started adopting around April 10th. That was when we had the veterinarians in, got everybody their post-brumation visit, and got things moving. Step 4. So depending on the facility you select, if you select Phoenix, we're moving through applications really quickly. We don't have a huge influx right now. So staff are able to get back in a couple days with the applicant. In Tucson, I know they had been receiving more, and they do this in addition to their normal duties at Sonora Desert Museum. So sometimes it might be a little bit slower. Here are some pictures that show some common concerns that we encounter. So, common one is no shade on the burrow midday, that it's just kind of baking in the sun. It's not going to stay in those optimal temperature ranges. No native plants or forage, like nothing for it to eat, and no plan to supplementally feed while the plants grow in. Chain link or chicken wire. We saw a lot of chicken wire this year, so we've definitely tried to add information. It's easy to get head, foot, leg caught, and it also encourages digging. When they can see through it, a lot of times they want to dig under to get to the other side. So 18 to 24 inches of a solid barrier is great. A few times we've had to ask, add some more insulation on top of the burrow, add some dirt, add a water dish, which is pretty easy. On the left, there was well-meaning, well-intentioned mulch that was added. And most mulch is actually toxic to reptiles, especially tortoises. So they were able to remove the mulch, get that situated, and they had a great enclosure that they'd set up. One in the middle, recent application, he worked super hard and got 18 to 24 inches of solid panels added to his chain link. And I think he's adopting this weekend, I think possibly today. The one on the far right, well-intentioned, but it probably is going to create more moisture. There was a layer of plastic added on top of that Wonder board, and that is going to kind of hold the moisture in. It also could be something the tortoise, they're curious. They might try to ingest it. So definitely don't add any plastic on top of the kind of cinder block style burrow that has the top to it. Step 5, here are some pictures of our lovely tortoises that we've adopted out. You're going to receive an approval email. It's going to provide you some more information, give you directions on where to go, kind of what the day will entail. It's a quick 30-minute appointment for pickup. You can also share some information if you prefer a male, female, kind of age range or size. And we do the best to match you up with the size enclosure that you have. And then here are 2 important places to go. Our website has all of the info, and then questions you can send to the Tortoise Adoption Program. That's a dedicated email address, and we can get back with you if you have questions that you didn't think about today.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. And we do have a couple questions. And as you kind of suspected, a few have come in related to kind of the plants and native plants. So perhaps if you could go back to slide 13, the one that was titled Desert Tortoise Diet.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. So you have your top 10 list here, and these aren't all necessarily native plants on the list, but there
No.
are several native plants on it.
Yeah.
And so one question was coming from someone who already has a desert tortoise. They've had it since 2018, and says it's the best pet ever. But it refuses to use their burrow, and it dug their own. And then it's also a picky eater. So they have grass, lots of spurge, rose petals, but he loves hibiscus leaves and romaine lettuce the most. And so the question is they need to plant more native plants, but don't know where to start. So do you have a recommendation on what would be maybe like the number one plant to start with, or a couple plants to start with? That you kind of mentioned global, so maybe that's one you highly recommend. Also easiest to maintain and also well liked by tortoises since they have a picky eater.
Yes, all great questions. Yes, what we have here all aren't necessarily native plants. There are some common landscaping plants that that are safe for desert tortoises and they like. It isn't odd to have a picky eater. We hear that often. Globe mallow tends to be a crowd favorite. It's pretty rare. I don't recall hearing like any of our tortoises on site that turn down globe mallow. Spurge is another one. Dandelion greens. We supplement the diet of the tortoises at the center during tortoise season with dandelion greens as well. Prickly pear, albeit not an everyday thing, that also tends to be something the picky eaters also like. I had some common plants at our outdoor expo with us. I had the trumpet flower. I also had, what else did I have? Yellow bells. And they loved those flowers as well. Native grasses tend to be favored, and Bermuda grass for many. They like to eat Bermuda grass. There's a variety of options. Romaine is something you can, kind of on a temporary basis use to supplement, but to get all of the proper diet, we usually use that as like a temporary thing rather than like long-term. You can get shell deformities and a variety of things when the diet's out of whack. And so that's why we always try to get back to like what they would find typically in the wild.
Okay, great. And then along those lines, a question that came in at the beginning of the presentation was related to what's a good source for seeds or for plants for their tortoise. And I had put a comment in the chat about that because our chapter has created some resources that kind of gives a recommended list of nurseries where you're probably more likely to find at least some native plants. Unfortunately, in the Phoenix area, we don't have any nurseries that I would say specialize in native plants, unlike the Tucson area. If you're in the Tucson area, then you're great. You've got a lot of things close to you. But do you have any recommendations for either sources for seeds or the landscaping plants themselves?
Great question. Yes, Tucson is very fortunate and has definitely a lot more options. You can find, it's again, hit and miss. You might have to go there and see what you can find. The globe mallows, maybe some of the penstemons, some of those things you can find. Now, the important part is inquiring with the nursery to know what they've put on those plants. So in a lot of the like more commercial nurseries, the fertilizer and what has been sprayed on the plants, you're going to want to give a period of time that the tortoise, isn't eating those plants, that you've got some, fresh growth. Typically, a lot of folks grow from seed. There's I think it's, what is it, Native Seeds in Arizona. They make a desert tortoise mix. I think it's one that's kind of planted, I think, around the monsoon, if I have that right. But they have seed packets you can order online. We have a little raised bed tortoise forage garden. So the tortoises aren't foraging in it, or there would be nothing with that many tortoises. So we kind of have some flowers and prickly pear, different things that we are able to provide. And then your grasses, those again are another, you could get the seeds. You can also get, you know, a sod like Bermuda grass and plant some of that.
Excellent. And then what you just mentioned that you have the Arizona Game and Fish has kind of a forage garden, you know, just to specifically grow plants for the tortoises to eat. Is that like a demonstration garden that people can go visit and kind of, again, if you're interested in maybe creating a habitat, or maybe if you already have one and you're just looking to see, you know, what do these plants look like, or how big should I be making them grow? You know, is that garden available to the public to see? And if so, where is it?
Great question. It unfortunately isn't in the front of our building, and our building isn't like open, you know, for tours. Having a demonstration garden and a demonstration habitat has been on our to-do list. I'm hoping this year we might be able to get one done out front, so you can stop by, you can look at it. We're also hoping to be able to add more example photos to our website, and people can kind of get ideas about it. There definitely are some nurseries that have started adding desert tortoise safe on at the nursery on kind of like the tags for the plants. And that's been an interesting kind of, maybe not new, but newer occurrence. And so we're hoping to work with more nurseries to be able to help them with the labeling of that. And that's definitely somewhere we're referencing the brochure that was created. That's something that will be able to help educate nurseries as well.
Excellent. All right. And someone else had a question related to a specific slide. I think it was slide 16, the one that is labeled step 5. So I'll let you flip to that.
Nope, I'm going the wrong way. There you go.
Okay, so I think this is the slide they're referring to, and it says the tortoise on the right has some white on its scutes. Mine has a little bit of that. What is that?
So sometimes as they kind of emerge, you know, they might have a little bit of white discoloration. The one in the middle is wet, so I think you kind of see like a different coloration. So the one on the right is typically more coloration you're going to see in the wild. When they get in the burrow, a lot of times they also get kind of mud on them. Did you say it was on the scute, like on the shell, that there's a little bit of white, or was it on the skin, you know, the head or the legs?
They wrote scutes.
Okay.
You're welcome to unmute or you know, clarify in the chat if that's not correct.
I think it's probably typical, just kind of coloration. Cool thing about desert tortoises is they aren't all, you know, the exact same color. So sometimes it just kind of dries out and it kind of has that a little bit of a white tint to it. Unless it has, you know, maybe a different look, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay, and I'll let you flip back to your last slide just so people can see those links again while we go through a few more questions. So as you said, people can kind of have their choice or, give their preference of whether they want a male or female if they adopt. And so as a pet, how do the males and females compare? Are there differences in maybe their behavior or their needs?
Good question. A lot of times it depends on each tortoise. Very rarely have we received aggressive tortoises, but they do exist. There are a few. One of them is staying with us probably forever. He has some learned behaviors, possibly from the house, or, well, he was a 2-time return. That poor dude. Probably had some poor interactions, I would assume, with dogs or other animals. So he's a rammer. So he will ram your leg and promptly want to bite at your shoes. So we've been actually working using some operant conditioning and different kind of training that we redirect that behavior. It's part of him. He's been doing it for a long time. Males can, they head bob. Sometimes they will ram into your leg, but that isn't all the time. That isn't like across all of the males. We've had just some delightful tortoises come through the program that are, larger males, and they're super curious and actually seem to enjoy being around humans. Same with females. So I don't feel like there's one or the other necessarily. I think some people that have small kids or really want a social tortoise, they'll put that in kind of their little wish list. Like, I really want to hang out in the yard with my tortoise. I'd like for it to be social, things like that.
Okay. And then we had a couple comments and questions sort of on a similar-ish topic. So early on, when we had people, open to introduce themselves in the chat, a couple people mentioned that either they've known someone who's had a tortoise and they've had to leave for a while, and just wanting to know about caring for a desert tortoise, maybe when someone else is away. Is as a pet sitter or just, a friend who's checking in on it, especially maybe over that winter brumation period. Is there a lot of, is there anything you have to do really? And then someone asked, if you are the owner, what do you do when you go away on vacation? How do you care for it? So sort of a similar topic, different angles of, either how to care for someone else's tortoise or what do you do when you have to leave for.
Great question. During the brumation period, depending on our temps, tortoises do come out of their burrows. So they might come out for the day, they might eat a little bit. Typically, we don't have water always available in like to soak throughout the winter, maybe a couple days of the week in case they did come out. A lot of times, in their burrow, we use kind of pack it in with a little bit of straw, just kind of hay to keep it nice, and especially when it gets colder in the winter. If you're watching the tortoise, kind of like pet sitting, I definitely would suggest talking with them about their routine. They're going to have a routine of how many times a week they, provide water to soak, what type of food. During the heat of the summer, I think the biggest thing to look for is making sure that the tortoise can get to, shade if it wants to, and also hasn't flipped over, because that is a really bad situation if they flip over and they can't get the leverage to get themselves righted. That kind of covers the pet sitting. What was the other part, Lisa, that I think I missed?
Yeah, so I think you answered the winter part. And yeah, and maybe just you're the owner. Is there is there a lot of people out there who are tortoise pet sitters, that you can kind of call, or could you just ask a friend, or are there some tips that they should give their friend if they're going to check in?
A lot of times it's going to be, fairly easy to either ask a pet sitter, ask a neighbor, a friend, to stop in, provide your routine that you have with your tortoise, what to look for. Most folks that have tortoises are going to have that down, kind of just like the instructions if you're leaving your dog or cat. And then depending, I guess, when I answered the cold weather time, that was in locations where desert tortoises are native. So in the higher country, you can adopt a desert tortoise. You're just going to have to go through a different cold weather care, and you're going to have to brumate the tortoise indoors somewhere. We've got instructions and info on that on our website that kind of goes into details, but they typically would brumate in a tub, like a Rubbermaid tote, but you would still check on them. So every day at the center, our staff check on the tortoises, make sure, might poke a leg in the burrow, see that there's movement, make sure that they're okay. That isn't something that always takes place. That's just something at the tortoise facility, because some of these did come in, with illnesses or different things, or finished up a medication round. So we always are checking to make sure everybody's moving, everybody's doing okay. So hopefully that kind of answers the kind of, what do you do if you go on vacation or leave or pet sitter?
Okay, yeah, and there was one more question that came in related to that. Asked, if you're away for just 2 or 3 days, will the tortoise be okay, eating grass and plants in the enclosure? So basically, if it's just a few days, is the tortoise okay without someone looking in on it? And then if so, how many days would you recommend, no, someone needs to check it out, or is it every day?
That one's probably going to vary. It's going to depend on your enclosure, your yard. Is your tortoise one that gets itself into precarious situations and is super curious? Or have you found your tortoise flipped over before? So a couple days having, everything in place, feeling confident that your tortoise, isn't super curious, hasn't been investigating or getting itself stuck somewhere, because that's really kind of what you're thinking of. Can it flip itself over or get itself stuck that it can't get out of the heat? Because really it's our summer temps that could be deadly if, that animal can't get itself, wherever it is. So it's really just kind of looking through your yard. Again, why we recommend, when possible, an enclosure, because you can remove a lot of those obstacles. You don't have the patio chairs or the buckets or rakes or things that can fall over on it if it's trying to go behind it. So I think it's probably going to be a case-by-case thing. But if you had forage and available water and shade and no other obstacles or hazards, you should be able to go for a couple days, and your tortoise will probably be doing the same stuff it kind of does in its enclosure most of the time.
Yeah, and the same person just added a comment saying that they added 2 web cameras to check on the tortoise when they're away. So that is a great recommendation. A lot of people have those now, and you could put that on your tortoise. And then if you see it's in some, precarious situation, you could then call on a neighbor or friend to come look after and help it out. So great recommendation there. Right, we're running low on time, but we had a question that was slightly off topic, but a good question that says, are there any tortoise survey volunteer opportunities this season? And if you don't know the answer, I have a particular recommendation. If you do, you're welcome to share.
I haven't seen any volunteer positions on our website, but doesn't mean that it won't happen. azgfd.gov, in the bottom, at the far bottom right, there's a place that says volunteer. and any volunteer opportunities would be posted there. I know that they are doing a fair amount of survey work this summer, and everybody was gearing up for surveys. I just don't know if they have any volunteer opportunities with that. I haven't heard anything.
Okay. And I happen to know of one. It is in relation with Arizona Game and Fish, because anyone who does that needs a permit, if I believe, from Arizona Game and Fish to do surveys. Locally with the McDowell Sonoran Conservancy, which is located in North Scottsdale. They do have a program. It's specifically geared towards their volunteer stewards, but it may also be open to just public volunteers. So I'm going to put that link in the chat. So if someone's interested in just checking that out, you can. But that was a great question. And then just one last question. Is there an easy way to determine the age of a tortoise?
That one is a little bit harder. Some of it's going to go to the size. Some of it you're going to be looking at the scutes, the shell. We were at our outdoor expo recently, and I was working the tortoise area with one of our field biologists, and we were kind of ground truthing each other on a couple of our adoptable tortoises that we had there, because I was curious his age, like how he goes about estimating the age, and he was curious how I was doing it. We were about within, I would say, probably about 5-7 years. It isn't a super scientific process. They can live, 80 plus years. So after you see a lot of tortoises, I guess you get a feel for the ages, because we kept ending up around the same age group. Our veterinarians, of course, are able to kind of ballpark it. They see all of our tortoises, so they see a lot, but I don't have any specific methods to know. I know sexual maturity doesn't typically happen until after about 10 years old. So you're going to see on the underside if there's a dent in the shell or not, if it's flat. So that can at least kind of give you like a starting point gauge. Generally adults are about size of a dinner plate, so that's kind of another little data point. They don't always grow to be that big, but you can kind of gauge it that way.
Okay, and then we had one last quick question that came in. So you said there's, I forget how many you mentioned, but a couple hundred tortoises to be adopted. So what happens to the tortoises that don't get adopted? Are there ones that are left over at the end of the season? What happens with them?
There's always tortoises left over, and they stay with us. They overwinter with us, and they go back out for adoption the next year. So yeah, depending on the year, depending on the qualified adopters, that's really why I'm trying to reach out to different audiences that are interested in many things that could be compatible with the desert tortoise, because we don't have an influx of adopters. When we do a big media push, we get a lot of applications, but they don't contain any of the necessary components to properly care for a tortoise. And that's a really hard place to then start from. Folks are frustrated. So we're really trying to start off with solid ways to be successful with your application and be set up for success. So yeah, they will just spend another year with us.
Okay, well, that sounds like a great action item for all of us then in the audience. If we we're thinking of maybe, adopting a tortoise, we now know what we need to do to get prepared. And if we just feel like it's not in the cards for us, or we just don't have the yard space available, we can spread the word though. We may think everyone knows about this, but it's not, that isn't necessarily the case. Or maybe they need some words of encouragement for someone else to, if you already have one, to just say how great it is, or if it's, easy, or, if it is hard, be honest, but, give people some real real tips and best practices so that they can have success. And we'll have this recording available, so you'll be able to share this too with others so they can learn about the program. And when they submit an application, be ready, not just someone who thinks they're ready, but has 5 steps to go through to get themselves ready. All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kelly. I really appreciate it. It was great having some folks in the audience who've already had a tortoise and just wanted to have someone to ask them questions to help them with the tortoise they already have, and then folks who are interested in getting one. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.